John Carter ran his gloved hand across the cracked metal door of the old outpost. The wind howled around him like a wild animal. Fine red dust blew over his boots and into his eyes. He blinked to clear his vision. Behind him, Kyle Harris helped Megan Lavra carry a battered supply crate toward the entrance. Nathan Woods trailed behind, scanning the horizon for movement. The outpost looked abandoned for decades. Its walls were dented and wires hung from broken panels. The roof had partly collapsed and plants struggled to find root in cracks of the floor. John's team had risked everything to find this place. Supplies were low, their water purifier was damaged, and the ship's engine would need parts they could only hope to find here. Megan knelt beside a ruined console. She brushed away layers of dust and dirt. She tapped a few wires together and tried to power up the system. Sparks flew. Megan jumped back with a quick step. She rubbed her arm and said, "I need to fix the power line. Give me a few minutes." Her voice was calm, but John saw worry in her eyes. Kyle set down the crate. He looked around at the empty hallway. It stretched into darkness. "This place gives me the creeps," he said. His voice echoed softly. Nathan shone his small light ahead. The beam revealed old posters faded by time, strange symbols and a picture of a planet with green forests. But here, nothing grew except the dust and shadows. John took a deep breath. He kept his face steady. "We stick together," he said. His voice was steady and kind. "We check each room, gather what we can, then move on." He patted Kyle's shoulder. Kyle nodded and took one more look down the hall before he followed John. They moved inside. Each step they took made the metal floor creak. Megan worked on the console behind them. She cut a wire, replaced it, then pressed a button. The console lit up with a faint blue glow. Megan smiled and said, "Power's back. But it looks like the climate controls are offline." She stood and brushed her hair back from her face. John walked to a wall panel and opened it. Inside were buttons and switches that were rusted. He flipped one switch and the lights in the corridor flickered on. Cold air hissed as the doors sealed behind them. Kyle grinned. "Welcome to the Dark Ages." He laughed softly. Nathan checked his scanner. It beeped with weak signals. "I'm picking up a storage room to the left," he said. "Could be useful supplies." The team headed left. They passed broken equipment and old sleeping bags. Dust covered every corner. They reached the storage room. Megan pushed the door open. Inside were metal shelves, mostly empty. A few containers held old food rations. The labels were faded. Kyle tested one pouch. He shook it and said, "I think there's still good protein by the sound of it." He tasted a small crumb and nodded, smiling. "Edible." John handed out pouches. They each opened one. Stale but safe. Nathan checked his watch. They had been on the ground for over 4 hours. The storm outside would return soon. The sky beyond the windows darkened with rolling clouds. Megan checked her datapad. The outpost logs were damaged, but she could piece together some history. "This place belonged to a mining colony," she said. "They dug deep for crystals that could power ships. But the storms grew stronger. They lost contact with the rest of their fleet. Food ran out, many left and never came back." She flipped through the files, her brow furrowed. Kyle looked out a small window. He saw jagged rocks on the horizon. Lightning struck one of them. The ground trembled. He stepped back, dropping his pouch. It burst open, crumbs scattered. He didn't bother to gather them. John turned to his team. "We can't stay long. We get what we can, then we head back to the ship." He pointed down a hallway marked with a faded symbol of a crystal. "That way is the generator room. If we can fix it, we might get more power and communication." He led the way. They followed the map Megan had recovered. The path narrowed. Walls were closer together. The air felt stale. Kyle knocked dust from his sleeve. "I hope this generator still works," he said. Nathan shivered. He pulled his jacket tighter. "I just want to get off this rock," he murmured. John glanced at him. "We will. Stay focused." He pushed ahead. The generator room door was heavy. John heaved it open. Inside, the massive machine was silent. Pipes were broken. A pool of oil collected on the floor. Megan approached. She knelt and examined the control panel. She tapped a button. The panel lit up, but the machine stayed quiet. She frowned and said, "I need time and better tools." Kyle set down another crate. He and Nathan opened it. Inside were parts they had brought from the ship. Megan smiled. She began to work, replacing fuses and tightening bolts. Sparks flew again, but this time without danger. The panel glowed steady. Outside, the storm hit. Wind rattled the walls. Debris pounded the windows. Megan tightened the last bolt. She pressed a final switch. The machine roared to life. Lights flickered in the hallways. The hum of power filled the room. John let out a breath he hadn't noticed he held. The team cheered softly. Kyle slapped his back. Nathan looked relieved. Megan wiped her brow and said, "We did it." John smiled. "Good work. Now let's get communication back online. We need to call for help before the storm knocks us out again." He stood straight and looked at his team. Each of them felt hope for the first time in days. With the generator alive, they might survive this place. But none of them guessed who would answer their call. After the generator hummed to life, John Carter turned to Megan Lavara. Her hair was streaked with oil and dust, but her eyes shone with relief. The lights in the outpost corridors glowed softly. John tapped the small console. He keyed in a simple command. The distress beacon flickered on. The machine emitted a low pulse. It would send signals across nearby star lanes for days until it ran out of power. Megan checked the meter. "We have enough energy for 72 hours, she said. "Unless we find more fuel or parts, the beacon goes dark." Nathan Woods set down his medical bag. He rubbed the back of his neck. 3 days isn't much, he said. "Storms are returning fast." Kyle Harris walked to a cracked window. He pressed his palm against the cool glass. The red dust storm raged outside. Lightning danced across the sky. He turned away. "This place beats any simulation I've seen." John gathered the small group. "We get supplies from the storage rooms, then we rest and wait. If anyone responds, we'll meet them at the landing zone near the north. Reach," he pointed roughly through a faded map. The team nodded. Megan and Kyle headed down a side corridor to find batteries and fuel cells. Nathan and John checked medical supplies and water. They moved through rooms that once served as living quarters. Broken beds lay in dust. Personal items were scattered. John picked up a small photo, faded by time. It showed a family on a lush world. He dropped it back gently, respect in his touch. Back in the generator room, Megan and Kyle stacked crates of fuel cells. Kyle wiped his brow and sighed. "If this beacon fails, we're on our own." He looked at Megan. She met his gaze and nodded. She had forced herself to stay calm, but he saw her worry. Outside, the storm thundered. The outpost walls rattled. A loud crack echoed. Dust particles shook free and settled. Nathan checked on the main corridor door. He pulled a lever to lock it. The metal buckled slightly but held. He patted the door. "I've seen worse," he said. John paced near the beacon. He watched the signal strength indicator. It read fair. He closed his eyes. Memories of past missions floated in his mind. He felt the weight of responsibility. If this beacon failed and no help came, the team might never leave this planet. Megan returned and joined him. She tapped a screen. "Signal is bouncing off a satellite relay. Should reach any passing vessel." She tried a small smile. "We only have to wait." The group gathered in the main hall. They set up foldable chairs and a small table. Nathan unpacked medical supplies. He checked each of them for scratches, cuts, or dust inhalation. Kyle cleaned a small wound on Megan's arm. She watched him. He tried to joke, but the words caught in his throat. John cleared his throat. "Let's eat and rest. We start patrols tomorrow. Megan and I will check the communications room. Kyle and Nathan can do hydroponics and water filters." He pointed at 2 closed doors. "Rotate every 6 hours. Then we all get rest." They ate protein bars and sipped recycled water. The taste was bland. Megan pushed crumbs around her plate. Silence pressed in. Outside, dust scratched the windows like fingernails. Later, Megan and John entered the comms room. It was cramped. Devices lined the walls. One panel hummed softly. Megan sat at a chair. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She adjusted frequencies and watched the incoming signals. Static hissed. She frowned. John peered over her shoulder. He tapped the screen. Anything from Earth Fleet? Megan shook her head. None yet, but the beacon is working. She tried to mask her relief. John stepped back. He spotted a cracked screen showing local planetary data. Crystal's mind here had been famous for energy storage. He tapped the panel. Readings showed deposits just outside the outpost. We could find supplies there, he said, if we risk it. Megan glanced at him. Outside the walls, storms are worse. Creatures roam. We'll need weapons. She looked at a rack where they had hung sidearms. All were empty. We left our gear at the landing zone, John nodded. We wait for help. He met her eyes. This place is unstable. No reason to risk lives. He put a hand on her shoulder. Megan sighed and returned to her console. She monitored the signal strength again. It read good. Meanwhile, Kyle and Nathan worked in the hydroponics bay. Small green plants struggled in glass tubes. Dusty leaves bent under the harsh lights. Nathan adjusted water flow. He frowned at pH readings. I can only adjust so much. The soil samples here are poor. Kyle knelt and examined a plant. He said softly, they're survivors like us. He touched a leaf gently. A drop of water fell. He wiped it and stood. I'll check the filters. He left. Nathan watched him go. He whispered, I hope we survive too. Nathan left for the filter room. The old purifier wheezed. He replaced. Worn parts, water dripped on the floor. He set up a small basin to catch the waste. He looked at the pipes. He knew every crew member might depend on this system. Back in the main hall, the team gathered for a patrol. John had crafted simple weapons. Lead pipes and sharpened metal rods. Megan carried a repair tool that could double as a mace. Nathan had a small medical kit and a stun prod. Kyle had a wrench and a flare gun. They stepped out into the storm. The wind hit them like a freight train. Visibility was low. They moved. In a tight line, John led. Megan scanned with a handheld scanner. Nathan stayed near the rear. Kyle kept watch for wildlife. The cliffs near the north ridge were jagged. Lightning lit the sky. Each flash showed shadows that moved. Their hearts pounded. John raised his fist. Quiet, he mouthed. Megan felt her pulse race. She pressed a button on her scanner. It beeped faintly. A signal came through, strength varying. She nodded to John. They neared the landing zone. Broken ship hull lay half buried in dust. Kyle gasped. He lifted a piece of metal. He saw symbols carved in the hull. He called John over. Under the symbols, a name in faint letters. Deathworlder 1. Nathan shone his light on the hull. He frowned. This name, it's not human. John studied the symbols. This is the distress beacon we sent? No, this is a different mark. He touched the carved symbol. He felt a chill. Megan checked her scanner again. The beacon signal was strong near the hull. She tapped coordinates. Someone came here. A low growl echoed. They froze. Kyle pressed. Back, a massive shadow moved beyond the hull. Its shape was hard to see in the storm. It moved quickly. John raised his rod. Megan grabbed her tool. Nathan readied the stun prod. Kyle loaded the flare gun. Each of them held their breath. The shadow halted. Two glowing eyes stared. They were big, menacing. Kyle fired the flare. It shot into the sky. It burst. Red light splashed over the hull and the shadow. The creature hissed and retreated. John heard a rumble. He called out, "Back inside!" They turned to run, but Megan stayed. She tapped her scanner. "The signal is not from us," she breathed. Something responded before us. Dust swirled. The storm raged. They dashed back toward the outpost. Behind them, lightning struck. A jagged rock and sent a tremor through the ground. As they reached the door, Megan slammed it shut. Nathan locked it. They leaned against it, breathing hard. John pressed his hand to his chest. "We're not alone," he said. His voice shook. "And help might already be here." Silence followed, broken only by the storm's howl. Inside, the team exchanged worried looks. Outside, the cratered landscape held secrets. On the edge of the landing zone, Megan Lavra felt her heart race. The battered signal from the distress beacon had drawn near. She watched the shadows in the storm, waiting. John Carter stood beside her. He adjusted his grip on the repair tool. He held like a staff. Kyle Harris stayed close, his flare gun at the ready. Nathan Wood scanned behind them, ensuring no creatures crept close. The wind roaring around them made it hard to hear. Red dust whipped their faces, their breath came in quick gasps. Megan checked her scanner again. The signal strength grew. She tapped the screen. "They're close," she said, her voice firm. John nodded. "Stay sharp." He glanced at Kyle. Kyle's hand shook slightly. Megan laid a hand on his arm. "We're safe together," she whispered. He took a steadying breath and gripped her hand for a moment. Far above, light cut through the storm. A distant shape appeared. First a faint glow, then a beam of blue light slicing through the dust. John shielded his eyes. "UFO?" he muttered. Megan tapped her scanner. "Unknown ships," she said. "They're big." As the ships drew closer, their true size showed. They were massive, wide as city blocks. Their hulls were dark and rough, like stone. Jagged spines rose from their backs. They angled down into the storm. Kyle fired a flare to signal. The white light streamed up. John watched as the ships banked toward them. Each carried a vast shadow below. The roar of their engines rattled the ground. Megan felt the vibrations. In her boots, Nathan gripped the stun prod. He peered at the nearest ship's underside. Huge open hangars lined the belly. Inside, shapes moved. They were tall, strong silhouettes. Their armor gleamed despite the dust. The first ship landed with a thunderous boom. The ground shook. Debris scattered. A gust of wind hit them, knocking Megan sideways. She caught herself against a rock. John called out, "Hold on to something!" He grabbed Megan's tool and kept his stance. Kyle braced himself. Nathan ducked low. After the ship settled, a hatch opened. A ramp extended with a hydraulic hiss. 4 figures emerged. They were enormous. Their bodies were thick and muscular. Their skin was dark gray, rough like armor. Their eyes glowed faintly orange in the stormlight. The Deathworlders had arrived. John stared in awe. They towered above him. Each carried heavy weapons strapped to their backs. Their hands ended in strong claws. Behind them, more Deathworlders appeared, climbing down steel ladders. Dozens formed a line in front of the ship. Kyle swallowed hard. "They look mean," he whispered. Nathan tightened his grip on the prod. Megan held her scanner. She tried to send a message, but her words caught in her throat. The Deathworlders stood silent. Then the leader stepped forward. He was larger than the rest. His eyes burned bright. He wore a breastplate of bone and metal. A skull hung from his belt. His voice rumbled as he spoke in a low tone. John's translator device crackled. The leader's words came through broken and stilted. "Humans," the leader said. "Why here?" John swallowed. He forced a calm tone. "We sent a request," he said. "We need aid." The leader crossed his arms. He looked at Megan's beacon device. He pointed to it. "This?" he asked. Megan nodded carefully. "Yes, we called for help." She spoke slowly, choosing plain words. The leader turned to his companions and barked orders. Some Deathworlders pointed weapons at the sky. Others scanned the ground with sensors. The leader looked back at John. He then motioned for John to approach. John stepped forward. Each step felt heavy. The dust crunched under his boots. Megan and Kyle flanked him. Nathan hovered behind with the medical bag. They reached the ramp. The leader crouched slightly too. "Meet John's height." John looked up. He met the leader's orange gaze. The leader sniffed the air. "Storm breath," the leader said. He pointed at John's sealed suit. "You weak, but alive." John nodded. "Storms are deadly here." The leader snapped his eyes to Megan. He reached out a claw and turned her scanner toward him. He examined the screen. Megan held her breath. After a moment, he clicked his mandibles, a sound like dry bones. He stood and turned to the rest of his team. They moved like a pack, spreading out to survey the area. Some carried cases of large metal cylinders. Others unpacked crates. Kyle whispered, "What are they bringing?" Nathan looked to John. "Let's find out." John raised his hands. "Thank you," he said in a loud voice, "for coming." He gestured to the outpost. "We have fuel and parts inside." The leader paused. He looked at the outpost. He cocked his head. A sudden rumble came from above. Another ship touched down. 2 more followed. Each landing shook the ground and filled the zone with wind. Soon, 6 ships had landed. Nearly 100 Deathworlders filed out. Their booms and hisses echoed. Megan watched as they formed a perimeter around the outpost. Kyle shivered. John watched too. He felt awe and fear mixed. Deathworlders were legends of dangerous worlds. They thrived where nothing else could. They were known to eat or enslave intruders. But these came now at his call. The leader signaled him to follow. John, Megan, Kyle, and Nathan climbed the ramp. Inside the ship's cargo hold, lights glowed amber. Metal crates lined the walls. Thick straps held them in place. The leader walked to one crate. He opened it. Inside were glowing power cells bigger than John's head. The cells hummed. He lifted one and carried it out. Another Deathworlder set down a stacked crate. John recognized spare parts and tools taped with labels in a rough alien script. Megan's single quotes' eyes widened. "That's enough to run this outpost for weeks," the leader grunted. He pointed at a nearby wall console. He tapped it with his claw. A holographic map appeared above it. The map showed jagged mountains, ruined cities, and dark forests. One point shimmered where John's outpost lay. John pointed to his own beacon. "Here," he said. The leader nodded. He tapped another point. It glowed, a crossed circle mark. Megan tilted her head. "That's Deathworld," she exclaimed quietly. John frowned. "They came from Deathworld? It's hundreds of light years away." The leader clicked his mandibles. He tapped the map again. A line drew from Deathworld to this planet. It cut through star lanes and nebulae. John pressed his lips together. They traveled far. The leader looked at him, then pointed to the map's far edge. Another blink of light marked an even farther point. John's eyes widened. "Another signal?" he asked. Megan checked her scanner. She saw a faint trace. "There is a second distress call," she said. "It came before ours," Nathan's brow furrowed. "Someone else called for help." Kyle whispered, "We're not the first to be stranded." Deathworlders moved crates into the outpost. The leader stepped aside. He motioned for John to leave. John turned and saw Megan and Kyle watching him. He nodded and climbed down the ramp. Outside, ramps extended from all 6 ships. Deathworlders unloaded equipment, fuel, and supplies. The storm began to calm as their machines cleared dust. John looked up at the ships. He thought of home, then at Deathworlders who could easily destroy them. But now they helped. He turned to Megan. "We'll have power, air, food." His voice cracked with relief. Megan smiled. Kyle walked to the leader. He bowed slightly. The leader watched him curiously. Kyle held out a protein pouch from the outpost. The leader eyed it, sniffed, then broke it open. He tasted a crumb. He grunted. He seemed pleased. Nathan knelt beside the leader and handed over a medical kit. He showed its contents. The leader tapped the kit and peeled open a pack of bandages. He nodded approvingly. John felt hope surge. Deathworlders were not mindless killers. They were warriors who respected strength and survival. Now they stood as allies. But questions remained. Who sent the first plea for help? What lay beyond the North Ridge? And could the humans trust these aliens? Inside the outpost, lights shone. Bright, the generator hummed stronger. Fuel cells lined the walls. Crates filled the hallways. John closed his eyes. He felt the storm's fury fade. Dawn might come tomorrow. And when it did, their world would change forever. Early the next morning, the storm had eased. Pale light filtered through dusty windows. John Carter stood by the console that tracked the Deathworlder ships. 6 vessels remained, and their power cells glowed green on the map. He tapped the screen and saw each ship's energy levels full. Megan Lavra joined him. She held a cup of recycled water. Steam rose from the warm liquid. She sipped and said, They're ready to move when we are. Her voice was soft. John nodded. We need to know who sent that first signal, he said. He tapped a button and the map zoomed out. He pointed to a distant ridge marked by a faded icon. And beyond the North Ridge, that's where the first call came from. Nathan Woods and Kyle Harris entered the room. Kyle stretched and cracked his neck. Megan offered him the water, and he drank gratefully. Nathan set down a small medical tray. He checked Megan's arm where she had been cut by a loose wire. You healed well, he said. Kyle peered at the map. We should go soon, he said. We can't just sit in this outpost. He looked at John. How far is the ridge? John tapped the console. Roughly 10 kilometers. Through rocky valleys and old mine shafts. He turned to Megan. Can you patch communications so we stay in touch with our ships? Megan nodded. She pressed a few keys. The console beeped. I've linked our comms to the ship's network. We have clear channels. She smiled. Outside, Deathworlders patrolled the perimeter. Their heavy boots shook the ground. They moved in pairs, scanning the horizon. Some carried long rifles. Others had tools slung on their shoulders. They seemed watchful, but not hostile. John watched them. He felt their power. Yet the Deathworlders had not shown anger or aggression. Instead, they were silent guardians. He looked at Nathan. I trust they will protect us. Nathan shrugged. I'd trust them more than the atmosphere out there. He tapped his comm unit. If anything happens, we call. Kyle checked his gear. He strapped on a small pack with food pouches and water bottles. He tested a grappling hook. Just in case, he muttered. Megan gathered engineering tools and sensor probes. She kissed her comm unit. Let's find out what's happening beyond that ridge. John nodded. He gestured to the squad. Stay close, we move as one. They left the outpost through the main hatch. Each Deathworlder on patrol stepped aside, giving them space. The team walked in single file. The path was littered with jagged rocks and twisted metal beams from collapsed tunnels. Kyle glanced back. He saw the outpost shrink in the distance. He felt a pang of sadness. It was a safe place now, but the past had left marks. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. Nathan paused to check his map. The sky above was pale red. Clouds drifted lazily. Lightning had stopped. Quiet reigned. Megan activated her tracker. Green dots showed Deathworlder ships behind them at fixed positions. One ship hovered low, scanning with a beam of light that swept like a sentinel. John walked ahead. He felt the ground beneath shift. He tapped his boot against a crack. The rock sounded hollow. He paused and knelt. He pressed his hand on the dust. Something was buried. He called the team. Megan peered. Kyle knelt beside him. Nathan shone his light. They cleared dust and found a metal hatch. It was half open. John pried it further. Inside lay a narrow passage descending into darkness. Megan coggled. Dust rose in motes. She tapped the hatch. This looks like an old service tunnel. She shone her light down the shaft. Rusted support beams lined the sides. Kyle frowned. Tunnels could be dangerous. He tapped his flare gun. Or easier than climbing the ridge. John weighed options. He saw the ridge beyond. The path up was steep. The tunnel could lead around obstacles. He looked at Megan. She shrugged. We explore carefully, John said. If it's safe, we follow it. If not, we climb. He stood and brushed dust from his pants. We need to get to that beacon source. They entered the tunnel one by one. John led with a flashlight. Megan held a small engine light. Kyle carried his flare gun. Nathan held his stun prod ready. The air was stale. Droplets of water fell. From the ceiling, the walls wept rust. Echoes followed each step. Their lights revealed old pipes and wires hanging loose. The passage turned sharply. They followed it for 10 minutes. At each turn, John marked walls with chalk. Megan recorded coordinates. Kyle scanned for creatures. Nathan listened intently. After 20 minutes, they reached a larger cavern. Their lights revealed a chamber with collapsed support beams. A pool of murky water covered the floor. Strange fungal growth on walls glowed faint green. Megan knelt beside the pool. She touched the water. It felt cool. She dipped a probe. Her scanner beeped. Readings showed low oxygen. We tread lightly, she warned. Kyle aimed his flare at the fungus. It lit up. Tendrils hung like curtains. He coughed at the damp smell. Some kind of biofilm? John shone light on the cavern's far wall. He saw symbols etched in stone. They matched the ones on the first ship hull. He traced them with his finger. These marks point toward a tunnel on the other side, he pointed. Nathan jumped. He shouted, "Movement!" Shadows flickered beyond the water's edge. Shapes moved quickly. Megan raised her scanner. It beeped wildly. Life signs, small and many. Kyle raised his flare gun. He fired one shot. The flare bounced off the cavern ceiling and exploded, illuminating dozens of small creatures. They were pale white, with long limbs and glowing eyes. They darted away. Nathan drew his stun prod. He advanced carefully. The creatures hissed, but did not attack. They scattered into holes. John stepped forward. He knelt and examined prints along the damp wall. "They're nocturnal miners," he said. "Small but not dangerous if we don't corner them." Megan checked the chalk marks. The tunnel led uphill. She tested her comm. "Deathworlders, this is engineering team. We're in an old tunnel. Please stand by." Static crackled. Outside, a beam of light swept the surface near the outpost. A Deathworlder ship hovered low, scanning. John stood. He motioned to move. "We go that way." He pointed up the sloping floor. They climbed to the next tunnel. After a short walk, they saw fresh metal walls. Old lights flickered. Cables ran along the ceiling. Kyle pressed a button on his scanner. Oxygen levels improving. Nathan knelt near a small hatch. He pried it open. Inside was a control panel. Wires coiled like snakes. Megan knelt beside him. She pressed a button. The panel flickered. A map appeared. It showed the outpost, the mine shafts, and a point farther north. A flashing red dot marked the origin of the first call. It lay beyond a collapsed shaft. John studied the map. "It's not far now." He looked at his team. "We head there, but we alert our allies first." Megan activated her comm. "Deathworlders, we found the path. Request support at the mine entrance." She waited. Static crackled. Then a voice, broken, rough. "Affirmative, we move." A distant rumble echoed. The tunnel trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kyle gripped his flare gun. Nathan readied his stun prod. Megan checked her scanner. John steadied himself. Outside, the chapter would turn. Deathworlders and humans would face the unknown together. But in that moment, deep under the planet's surface, the team felt both dread and hope. The tunnel exit opened onto a rocky clearing under a storm-dark sky. John Carter shielded his eyes against the wind. He saw a narrow path leading up a cliff toward the ridge. Deathworlder searchlights moved across the rocks behind them. "Megan?" Lavra checked her scanner, her breath visible in the cold air. "Signal is strong here," she said. "Just a few hundred meters to the source." Kyle Harris lifted his flare gun. "Let's hope this is it." He took the lead. Nathan Woods followed, monitoring the COMMS. John led the way, stepping carefully on loose stones. The path was steep and treacherous. Each step threatened to send them sliding. Megan kept an eye on the tunnel map she held, while Kyle tested the ground with his boot. Suddenly a tremor shook the ground. Rocks fell from above. Megan ducked. Kyle caught her arm and pulled her to safety. A large boulder tumbled past, crashing behind them. "Rock slide!" John shouted. He pointed up. A group of jagged stones hovered, then fell. The team scattered. John grabbed Kyle's hand and pulled him down. Nathan threw himself to the ground and covered his head. Megan reached for a nearby crevice and held on. After what felt like an age, the shaking stopped. Dust filled the air. The rocks lay scattered across the path. John stood and helped his team up. "Everyone okay?" he asked. Megan brushed dust from her sleeves. "I'm fine." Kyle rubbed his shoulder. "Good save." Nathan tested his comm. "All systems go," they continued. Light from Megan's scanner pulsed ahead. The ground level. A strange structure rose before them. It was built into the cliff, metal walls fused with stone. A large door, half buried in rock, bore symbols matching those on the ships. John approached. He studied the door's surface. Grooves traced the shapes of the symbols. A circular indent sat at its center. Megan knelt and ran her hand over the indent. "It's a key slot," she said. "Something fits here." She looked at her tools. She found a small metal sphere from her pack. Kyle watched. "Try it." Megan placed the sphere in the indent. It clicked. The door shuddered. Cracks spread. The metal pulsed with blue light. John stepped back. "Stand clear." A section of the door slid away, revealing darkness beyond. The entrance was just big enough for 2 people abreast. Nathan took a deep breath. "Shall we?" John nodded. "Stay alert." He and Megan entered. Kyle and Nathan followed. Inside. The corridor was lined with ancient technology. Glowing lines ran along the walls, casting pale light. The floor was smooth but covered in dust. Megan checked her scanner. "Oxygen here is low, but life support is active." They moved forward. The corridor widened into a chamber. At its center stood a console. Screens flickered. Symbols they did not understand blinked. Kyle ran his hand over one screen. It lit up. An image appeared, a planet with swirling storms and dark oceans. A red dot marked a location on its surface. Nathan studied the image. "This is the homeworld of Deathworlders." Megan tapped the console. More data appeared. Lines of text in an alien script. John pointed at a line. Megan translated roughly. "They recorded distress signals here. They waited 6 months for a reply. When none came, they launched a rescue team." Kyle whistled. "They came all this way looking for us." John studied the data. "But why wait so long?" he asked. Megan scrolled. "Protocol says only respond if there is safe passage. They feared the storms would destroy them." Nathan frowned, so they were cautious. Suddenly the console beeped. A light pulsed. Megan looked surprised. "Incoming transmission." John stood on speaker. A voice spoke in the alien language. The translator flickered. The voice came through clearer. "Team at Beacon, we confirm presence." The console displayed a small icon representing them. It blinked. John replied, "This is human team at site. We found your records." A moment passed. Then the voice spoke again. "Prepare ceremonial greeting. Protocol dictates honor." Kyle blinked. "Ceremony?" Nathan smiled. "Looks like they honor those who call for help." Megan pressed a button. A hatch opened at the far end of the chamber. Beyond lay a large hall. Glowing runes lined the walls. A column of steam rose from a pit in the center. John led his team through. They entered a vast space. At the far end, Deathworlder figures stood in solemn formation. Their leader stood ahead, flanked by warriors bearing ceremonial staffs. John felt the air hum with energy. The warriors bowed their heads. The leader held out his hand. In it was a small carved statue of stone. John stepped forward and bowed respectfully. The leader spoke. The translator said, "We honor you. Call of the lost." He placed the statue at John's feet. It depicted 2 beings, one human, one Deathworlder, standing side by side. John nodded and stepped back. Megan held her gaze on the statue. Kyle wiped his eyes. Nathan stood tall. The leader then raised his voice. The translator said, "You are now bound by oath of rescue. We share strength and life." The warriors behind the leader placed their hands on their hearts. Their armor clinked softly. The chamber echoed. John felt a mix of awe and gratitude. He raised his hand to his helmet. The leader replicated the gesture. Their hands mirrored each other. Kyle whispered, "We have an alliance." Nathan's eyes shone, stronger than I imagined. Megan looked at the runes. She pressed her palm to the wall. The runes glowed brighter. Outside, the storm had calmed. Sunlight filtered through. Birds strange, alien creatures flew overhead. John turned to his team. "We should return. We'll bring news to our outpost and beyond." The leader watched. The translator crackled. "Go with honor." John bowed. Megan and Kyle followed. Nathan gave a final nod. They left the hall. The console powered down. The chamber grew dim. Back at the outpost, the Deathworlders would rejoice, supplies would flow. Human and Deathworlder alike would celebrate their bond, but for John's team, the greatest prize was the knowledge that help would always come, even from worlds that seemed impossible. John Carter stood at the main console, watching the Deathworlder ships link to the outpost. 6 green icons pulsed steadily, showing full power. He felt cautious optimism. Megan Lavra and Kyle Harris cleaned tools nearby. Nathan Woods checked supplies. A gentle hum and distant roar echoed outside. Deathworlders had cleared dust around the outpost, revealing more old equipment. Crates of parts and fuel cells lined the outer walls. Megan tapped her datapad. "We have enough power for weeks now. We can repair the ship soon." She smiled. Kyle held up a power cell. "This thing is like a portable reactor." He placed it in a rack. The hum grew louder. Nathan adjusted medical supplies. "And we have food. For days, water purifier works. We're safe." He glanced at John. John nodded. "We owe everything to our saviors." He left the console and stepped outside. Through the dust-cleared windows, he saw Deathworlders at work. Some lifted heavy panels with ease. Others carried fuel cells into storage rooms. Machines hissed and roared. John walked out. A Deathworlder in simple armor stood by an open crate. The creature's orange eyes met John's. It handed him a small device. John took it. Megan's translator app read, "For communication." He pressed a button. Static, then a clear voice. "This is Deathworlder Central. All arrivals secure." John spoke. "Thank you. We are grateful." The voice replied, "We await your readiness." John looked at the Deathworlder. He bowed slightly. The alien clicked its mandibles and turned away. A roar sounded from behind the outpost. John turned and saw creatures approaching. Mutated predators large. Lizard-like beasts with glowing red eyes. They sprinted toward the camp. Kyle shouted, "Attack!" John grabbed Megan's arm. "Inside!" He pulled her toward the door. Nathan and Kyle ran to cover the entrance. Deathworlders raised weapons and bellowed. The humans reached the generator room. Megan slammed the door. Kyle locked it. Sparks flew as bolts slid home. Outside, Deathworlders fired energy rifles. Blue bolts struck the predators. Creatures hissed and fell. One beast leapt at the outpost wall, claws scraping metal. Nathan checked his medical kit. "We need to help." He grabbed a stun prod and hurried back. John pressed a button to open the door. The humans sprinted out. The battle raged. Deathworlders fought with brutal strength. They tore predators apart with their claws. Energy blasts lit the dust. Kyle threw a flare at a creature that circled behind the camp. The explosion blinded its eyes. John charged, using a metal pipe. He struck the beast, then Kyle fired his flare gun. Nathan stunned a smaller predator, threatening a wounded Deathworlder. Megan patched a damaged panel on the outpost wall, restoring a shield that protected the base. After minutes that felt like hours, the last predator fell. The ground was littered with creatures' carcasses and Deathworlder armor scorch marks. Silence settled. Dust drifted. Deathworlders roared in victory. John and his team stood in awe. They panted, covered in dust. One Deathworlder approached. It pressed a hand to its chest, then pointed at John. The translator, brave. John felt pride. He bowed. The Deathworlder placed a hand on his shoulder, strong but gentle. Megan cleaned her hands on her pants. Kyle joined them. Nathan checked each human and Deathworlder for injuries. None were serious. John spoke through his translator. "We fight for each other now." The Deathworlder clicked. Alliance sealed. Later, around a makeshift campfire, humans and Deathworlders shared food. Protein pouches and strange alien meat cooked over blue flames. John raised his cup. "To unity." Deathworlders banged their cups. Megan smiled and joined in. As night fell, the stars shone bright. The outpost glowed with life. Humans and Deathworlders stood side by side. John looked at the horizon. He remembered their plea for help. He thought of the first distress call and how help had arrived from worlds beyond. Their bond was sealed. They begged for aid and were stunned when Deathworlders arrived.